After days of deadly clashes, Syria's new government is declaring victory over loyalists of ousted President Bashar al-Assad. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says more than 1,300 people are dead in what's being called Syria's worst outbreak of violence since Assad's ouster. That violence started Thursday when pro-Assad gunmen reportedly attacked the new Islamist authorities. In a televised speech, Syria's interim president, Ahmed al-Shara, vowed to find the perpetrators of the violent clashes. Now the country's defense ministry says its operation is complete. Foreign correspondent Marcus Moore and ABC News national security and defense analyst Mick Mulroy join me now for more. Marcus, what's the latest?
Well, Diane, there had really been relative calm in Syria since December, but the violence has been escalating. And as you mentioned, this is likely the deadliest weekend in Syria in 14 years of conflict there. And certainly since Bashar al-Assad's government was toppled last year. And the numbers really are staggering. More than 1,300 people, including almost 800 civilians and roughly 125 members of Syria's security forces and also 148 fighters who are loyal to Assad. They were all killed, according to Syria's Observatory for Human Rights. And we understand that the clashes that unfolded over the weekend were the result of a military operation, that there had been an ambush. And then the observatory says that that military operation and the violence that followed then led to revenge killings of Alawite minority civilians. And Diane, there are reports that people were shot in front of their homes, many at close range, and also reports that homes were looted and burned. And so really a horrific weekend, 2 days in Syria. And as you mentioned, the defense ministry now says that the situation is under control and that the military operations have concluded.
So, Mick, Syria's interim president is also calling for unity. How likely does that seem right now?
So, Diane, it's important to point out that the interim president used to be the leader of al-Qaeda in Syria. So there was a lot of questions about whether he was going to be the reformist he claims to be, or whether he was going to go down the route of essentially being a jihadist. And I think, as Marcus points out, the majority of those killed in these clashes were civilians. So there's a big question about whether he is this reformist or whether this is going to lead to a broader civil war. And directly to your question, I think every minority group, the Alawites being one of them, but certainly the Druze and the Kurds and other regions, are going to look at this and decide that they need to essentially protect themselves at all costs. They're not going to be looking at any kind of unification with the government if this is how the government treats the minorities. They're going to look at protecting themselves. So this is headed in a bad direction. We're already seeing Syrians flee into Lebanon. Hopefully this can get back on track. I know there's a UN National Security Council or a Security Council meeting today on this subject.
So, Mick, could this unrest and this violence have a larger impact beyond Syria?
Yes, and so there's already movement of individuals from Syria leaving and going to countries like Lebanon, who already have a lot of Syrian refugees there. It's very difficult for them to absorb more, especially having gone through the fighting that they went through with Israel. So this could destabilize the whole region, which is why the whole region is very concerned that this could spark into a broader civil conflict again in Syria.
Mick, enough so that the U.S. would have to step in, you think?
Well, I don't think the U.S. would essentially step in with force to stop the fighting, but it's important to point out that we have forces in Syria, predominantly in the east, where the Kurdish-led SDF is present. And we do have a base in the south where the Druze are essentially present. So we are there, but it's very unlikely we would use force, our military, to try to stop the fighting. We would stay away from these flashpoints.
All right, Marcus Moore, Mick Mulroy, thank you both.